Welcome back to the final episode focused on the Indian election in 2024. There's still some time to go. Soon we will know who the winner is. In today's episode, I will focus on employment. And honestly, this is quite difficult because statistics are not easily available. Based on various media reports, one gets the impression that unemployment is an issue in the Indian context, and in fact, unemployment is getting worse. I only selected 2 out of many articles, but they seem to all state similar findings. For me, as always, the focus is on what exactly is the evidence. As you know, data, not feelings. The first article focuses on rising inequality, wealth inequality, and unemployment. A bit an odd combination in a way, but The Guardian likes to talk about wealth inequality quite a lot, doesn't really understand much about how things should be measured. In this article, the evidence presented is basically anecdotal evidence, so it is put differently storytelling. You find a few people that like to complain, and that's basically your evidence. Now, that's not massively robust. The second article focuses on unemployment and argues that unemployment is increasing in India. Now, this was published by Reuters, so you would hope they have some solid evidence. Unfortunately, the evidence is based on a think tank, which in fact is not necessarily a charity. It's a privately owned company. There are some arguments actually who is controlling this business, but I don't really want to dive into this. Now, based on the article, it states the following. According to the Center for Monitoring Indian Economy, an economic think tank, the unemployment rate was 7.6% in March. Now, this is quite remarkable because there is virtually no statistics available that would allow you to say an awful lot about monthly level of unemployment in India. That's not actually straightforward to do. The issue with that is no access to the data is provided. And we will look at various data sources, but the Indian context is really difficult. Getting the data, focusing on data quality is the main challenge. The first thing is around definitions and consistency, but this is true across countries. So that's not really specific to India because definitions tend to change. And certainly over time, measurements are not at all consistent. Now, in the Indian context, the focus is on employment from the age of 15, so that's usually how the data is compiled. Now, things vary a lot between countries, so making any cross-country comparisons is a real challenge, so we don't really want to attempt it here. The other issue is the type of employment, because the vast majority of people are in casual labor, so they don't really have any contract. It's not easy to obtain the data, and this accounts for between 40 and 50%. Next, very high levels of self-employment. So here we talk about 30 to 40%, and only a small number of salaried workers, so they are paid weekly or monthly, and here we talk about 10 to 15%. So on the 10 to 15%, you will get good data. You also will get data from income taxes and so on, but on all the other members of the workforce, the data is a real challenge. There is certainly a very pronounced urban-rural divide. There are huge also regional disparities. I went into reports for various states, and the best you can do under these circumstances is to rely on surveys, because end of the day, it also depends on the benefit system. So in the UK context, of course, there are benefits that you can potentially obtain. In the Indian context, well, if you're unemployed, you are unemployed, first of all. So there is not an awful lot you would expect. So that makes reporting unemployment very difficult, and indeed the best you can do is you look at survey data. Now this is data provided by the World Bank, so this is part of the World Development Indicators, and it's an estimated unemployment rate. Now again, one has to be all a bit careful with the quality and reliability of the data, but it's hard to argue that unemployment is going up. In addition, we certainly know, and we have done this in other videos, that economic growth was quite robust in this period. So to assume that unemployment is going up is a little bit counterintuitive, but certainly the evidence does not seem to suggest that. You have reports for different districts, so this gives you a few insights. They are all available online, so if you want to dig into this. The best, I would argue, you can obtain is the India Employment Report. So that is quite detailed and it's survey-based. And of course, surveys are not perfect because surveys, of course, rely on people responding to it. So you have a non-response bias. There are always sample selection issues, and you will see this in the data as well. Unemployment rates are certainly not going up. You can't really say that. Of course, again, one has to be careful how reliable are these estimates, but the estimate is somewhere around 4 to 5%. Now, this seems to be more in line with what you see in the World Development Indicators. However, again, have in mind it's survey data, so you see quite a high rate of fluctuation as well, which might not really reflect reality that much. The other thing to observe is the labor force participation rate, because that's another element to this story, and traditionally in India it has been quite low. And you see also here low levels in this period. But again, one needs to be careful with it. And you see in particular, you have quite high fluctuations. So do I really believe there was a 5% drop from 2012 to 2019 and it goes up again by 5%? I'm not quite convinced that this is the case. Certainly what you can see in the data is gender disparities, and there are various reasons for that, and I think it's a lot to unpack, so it might require a separate video. The other thing one has to really stress is the underemployment rate. So this is closer to what Reuters cites, so about maybe 7.5%. But again, there is no convincing evidence that underemployment is going up in this period during Modi's government. So looking at the evidence you have, which arguably is of course not perfect, it's hard to argue that unemployment is getting worse. Underemployment, I think, is maybe the most realistic measure. Of course, that again is survey-based. So what you do is you ask people, do you want to work more? So that's the first issue. The next issue is, do people actually have the capacity to work more? So both is assessed. So that's all what we can actually argue. So would I make a big headline out of it? Honestly speaking, I wouldn't. I certainly think it's not straightforward to answer. these questions because the data available is not, of course, 100% reliable. The best you can do is explore the survey data. These are quite large surveys, but of course here again it's more difficult to really talk much about a time trend. Now this video will be released on the 27th of May, so there are still a few days to go until we know the result. Great, I see you in the next video.